Well, turning to the debate on gun control in America, it seems President Donald Trump has changed his views yet again on background checks for all gun buyers, saying the nation's background check system is already strong. But he also says he has, quote, an appetite for plugging loopholes in the process. All of this comes just 2 weeks after those back-to-back mass shootings in Texas and Ohio that claimed the lives of 31 people. Here's what Mr. Trump had to say about working with Democrats to find a solution.
We have a lot of background checks right now. Gun owners can tell you that, others can tell you that. But there are certain weaknesses. We want to fix the weaknesses, and I think that'll happen. Let's see what happens. I'm concerned that no matter what we agree to, when we get there, I'm concerned the Democrats will say, oh, well, we now want this and you know, it's a slippery slope.
Well, the president denies he's backing down on tougher gun control after a recent discussion with the National Rifle Association's Wayne LaPierre. Here's what he said last year about America's biggest gun lobby.
Don't worry about the NRA. They're on our side. You guys, half of you are so afraid of the NRA. There's nothing to be afraid of.
He certainly changed his tune. Meantime, a new CNN poll indicates a majority of Americans disapprove of the way Mr. Trump is handling gun policy. Only 36% of those polled think he's handling it well, while 54% of respondents said he's not. Well, joining me to talk more about the prospects for change in the country's gun laws is Andy Parker. He's the father of Alison Parker, a reporter fatally shot on live television 4 years ago. Mr. Parker, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Linda, for having me.
Andy, your daughter Alison was a reporter. She was 24 years old. She and her cameraman Adam Wards was 27, gunned down by a disgruntled employee while at work. And it was 4 years ago this month. I am really, really sorry for your loss. And
4 years
ever
ago
since
next week.
4 years ago next week.
Yeah.
How are you doing?
It's a tough week for me because we celebrated her birthday on Monday, and then a week later, she was 4 years ago, we celebrated her birthday, and a week later she was dead. So it's a tough week.
It's a tough week, and no doubt. I can't imagine, but I do know that ever since her death, you don't want it to be in vain. You have been working really hard to try to improve regulation in the US. If you had to give the United States a rating on how it's doing to tackle gun violence, what would you give it?
Well, right now it's an incomplete. And the reason that I would give it an incomplete grade is that we are making progress, and we are going to see this thing through. And because the vast majority of Americans want sensible gun legislation. And you mentioned that, you know, you played the clip of Trump saying, oh, you know, nobody's afraid of the NRA. We're not afraid of the NRA. Well, he's afraid of the NRA when he talks to them. And we've seen this behavior before from this man who is unstable and the leader of this country. The same thing happened at Parkland, where, in fact, I think those comments were pulled from in the aftermath of Parkland when he said, oh, we're going to do background checks. We're going to ban assault weapons and bump stocks and all of this. And then as soon as he talked to the NRA, he backed down. But the good news here in this country is that people have had enough. The Parkland kids really put this issue at the forefront. And when you have the kind of chaos and the carnage that we're having in this country, people have had enough of it. So it's going to start here in Virginia. This fall, we have elections, and as soon as we add 2 seats in the General Assembly, you're going to see gun legislation passed, and that's going to be a message for the rest of the country in 2020.
One law being discussed is red flag laws, which would allow family members or law enforcement to seek court orders restricting someone from their firearm if they show some sort of red flag. And we know with the El Paso massacre 2 weeks ago that the mother of the suspected gunman had contacted police, had raised a red flag saying, I don't think my son should have this gun. He's immature. He has no experience with firearms. You believe a red flag law might have possibly prevented the death of your daughter?
I do. And I think that if there's any legislation on the state and national level, that's probably going to be the first one that's going to be passed. But I do think that had it been around and in effect in Virginia 4 years ago, that Alison would still be doing the news and I would not be talking with you. But we've got to get that one done. And unfortunately, the NRA does not want that. They don't want anything.
You mentioned, as I have earlier, that there is momentum for change, given the opinion polls that we're seeing. But the last time the federal government passed any sort of law that limited the spread or use of guns in the United States was 25 years ago, and that was a law that expired after 10 years. The polls we're seeing show that 60% of Americans want stricter gun laws. That's a CNN poll. We also have a poll from Fox News, which pretty much mirrors many other polls we have seen, that show that 90% of people favor background checks.
Yes.
Why, when only 30% of Americans own guns, do you think it's so hard to push through background checks?
Well, listen, you can't get 90% of the American public to agree that Mother's Day is a good thing, but they agree on this. And the only thing that's stopping them is Moscow Mitch and Donald Trump and the NRA. Those are the only impediments to this, and we're going to overcome those impediments in Virginia and then the elections in 2020. Because the people are tired of being fearful to go to the grocery store, the movie, or Walmart. You can't have this kind of thing. And listen, we're not going to, gun violence in this country, we have more guns than we have people here. So you're not going to solve this problem altogether, but doing nothing makes no sense. You can save lives, and that's what I've tried to do. That's why I've done it, to try and save lives for my daughter, to honor her through action.
And you are absolutely doing that. I want to talk a little bit more about the change we have seen in the US president, because you mentioned it earlier. After the Parkland massacre, President Trump came out and accused other lawmakers of being afraid of the NRA. But today we're hearing him toe the line, talking about any regulation would be some sort of slipping point to taking away everyone's guns. Do you think pushing out that sort of fear is working?
Well, Lynda, the NRA spent $30 million to get him elected, and they want to see a return on their investment. And unfortunately, you have 40% of the public in this country, 40% that, as Trump tells a lot of lies, but probably this one is not a lie, that he could shoot somebody in the middle of Fifth Avenue and his supporters wouldn't care. And I think that's the God's truth. He's doubling down, and he's counting on those 40% of the people to carry him to victory, that they're going to show up in mass, and our side isn't. But I think he's in for a rude awakening.
Andy Parker, really good to get your perspective on all of this. Well done on everything you've done so far in the last 4 years, pushing to get some sort of regulation that will make the US a safer place. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Lynda.